The Voiceless Man. In his final revelation, God laid down a revolutionary new standard for humanity. Indeed, the most noble of you in the sight of God is the most righteous of you. Quran, chapter of the Chambers, 49:13. No story embodies this divine principle more powerfully than that of Bilal ibn Rabah, the Abyssinian slave who was once voiceless, tortured for his faith, only to be chosen by the Prophet himself to become the resounding voice of Islam. His life poses the ultimate question: what is the true measure of a man? Is it the color of his skin, the circumstances of his birth, or the wealth of his master? Or is there a power hidden deeper within the soul, a power that can turn a voiceless slave into the resounding voice of a new world? Our story begins in the belly of the beast, in the bustling, sun-scorched valley of Mecca. This was the heart of ancient Arabia, a city of poets, merchants, and chieftains. Its lifeblood was commerce, and its soul was chained to the 360 stone and wooden idols that filled the courtyard of the ancient Kaaba. Power was the city's primary currency, determined by lineage, tribe, and wealth. It was a world of rigid, brutal hierarchy, where the strong feasted on the weak, and honor was a cloak worn only by the powerful. In this world lived a man who, by every measure of his society, was worthless. His name was Bilal ibn Rabah. He was a tall, strikingly dark-skinned man of Abyssinian, Ethiopian descent, born into the chains of slavery. His body was not his own. It belonged to one of the most powerful and cruel chieftains of the Quraysh tribe, Umayyah ibn Khalaf. Umayyah was a man whose wealth was matched only by his arrogance, a staunch defender of the idols and the oppressive system that made him rich. Bilal's life was a monotonous cycle of grueling labor under a merciless sun. His voice, a deep and resonant baritone, was not his to use. It was an instrument for obedience. In the boisterous gatherings where noblemen recited poetry, Bilal was an invisible presence, a silent shadow serving men who saw him as less than human. He was a voiceless man in a city that celebrated eloquent speech, a property among people who prided themselves on their freedom. His future was a foregone conclusion, a life of servitude ending in an unmarked grave. Yet within this man, beneath the layers of oppression, lay a heart of immense purity. He would watch the powerful men of Makkah bow to Hubal and Al-Uzza, idols their own hands had carved, and a quiet bewilderment would stir in his soul. How could a man of intellect prostrate to a thing that could neither help nor harm him? This innate sense of justice and pure monotheism was his only private treasure, a seed of faith waiting for rain. At the same time, another man walked the streets of Makkah. His name was Muhammad ibn Abdullah, peace be upon him, a man of such unimpeachable character that he was known as the truthful and the trustworthy. Then one day the rain began to fall. A new message began to trickle through the city, whispered in secret. It spoke of Muhammad, who had returned from a mountain cave with a revelation. He spoke of a stunning and dangerous truth. There was only one God, the creator of all things, a God who demanded not empty rituals, but justice, compassion, and the liberation of the oppressed. This message declared that in the eyes of this one God, lineage and wealth were meaningless. For the chieftains of Quraysh, these words were a declaration of war. For the downtrodden, the weak, and the enslaved, they were the first glimpse of a forgotten dawn. Bilal began to hear these whispers. He heard the mockery and rage of his master as he plotted against this new magician. But he also heard something else. He heard the words of the new revelation itself, recited by the early believers. Words of such profound beauty, they seemed to speak directly to the silent, yearning part of his soul. Drawn by an irresistible pull, he found his way to a secret meeting. Hiding in the shadows, he listened as the prophet, peace be upon him, spoke of a God who heard the cry of the oppressed and valued a pious slave more than an arrogant master. For the first time, Bilal heard a message that defined him not by the color of his skin, but by the content of his heart. In the darkness of his servitude, a single brilliant ray of light had pierced through. He knew, with a certainty that eclipsed all fear, this was the truth. But in Makkah, to embrace that light was to invite an agony beyond all imagination. The choice was before him: a lifetime of safe, soul-crushing silence, or a single word of truth that would surely cost him everything. The word that broke the silence. The decision was not made in a moment of passion, but in the quiet solitude of a soul that had found its home. Bilal ibn Rabah sought out the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and in the sanctuary of the house of Al-Arqam, he bore witness that there is no God but the one God, and that Muhammad is his messenger. The Voiceless Man had spoken. In that moment, he was a free man in the sight of God, even as the physical chains remained. But secrets in Makkah were a luxury the powerful did not afford the weak. His conversion was soon discovered. Umayyah ibn Khalaf, a man who saw the new faith as a direct threat to his supremacy, confronted Bilal. "Is it true," he seethed, "that you have followed Muhammad and abandoned the religion of your masters?" Bilal, who for years had only bowed his head, now stood tall. The light of faith had extinguished the shadow of fear. With a calm that infuriated Umayyah, he replied, "I believe in the one God, and I follow his messenger." The confirmation sent Umayyah into a frenzy. This was a revolution. If a slave could choose his own master in the heavens, he might one day choose his own master on earth. The rebellion had to be crushed and made into a terrifying example. And so began one of the most brutal persecutions in the history of Islam. Umayyah's torture was designed to break the human spirit. As the Meccan sun reached its zenith, when the sand of the desert floor became a bed of burning coals, he would order Bilal dragged out into the open. Stripped of his clothes, he was thrown onto the scorching sand, and a massive, searing hot boulder was rolled onto his chest, crushing him against the fiery ground. As Bilal lay there, pinned and suffocating, Umayyah would stand over him, sneering. "You will stay here until you die," he would scream, "or until you renounce Muhammad and pray once again to our gods. Who is your Lord, Bilal?" The pain was unimaginable. His bones creaked, his skin blistered, and his lungs burned for air. Every instinct screamed for him to give in. The other slaves were often forced to watch, a living lesson in the price of defiance. They waited for him to break, but from the crushed chest of Bilal ibn Rabah, something extraordinary emerged. It was not a scream of pain. It was a voice, weak and raspy, but imbued with a power that shook the souls of those who heard it. Through cracked lips, he would repeat two single defiant words: "He is one, he is one." This was not just a phrase. It was his entire creed, his shield, his rebellion. Every time Umayyah demanded he name the false gods, Bilal responded with the ultimate truth. He was not just answering his torturer, he was speaking directly to his creator. With every repetition, He stripped Umayyah of his power. The master could crush his body, but he could not touch the sanctuary of his soul where God resided. Alone and without partners, the words became a weapon, turning the desert into a pulpit of unwavering faith. As recorded in the biographies of the companions, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, the Prophet's closest friend, was passing by and saw the horrific scene. He approached the furious Umayyah. "Have you no fear of God?" he asked. Umayyah, seeing a chance for profit, scoffed. "You are the one who corrupted him, so you save him." Without hesitation, Abu Bakr began to negotiate. He knew the only language Umayyah understood was money. He offered to buy Bilal. Umayyah, thinking he was selling a slave on the verge of death, agreed. As Abu Bakr led him away, Umayyah sneered. "If you had refused to buy him for more than 1 ounce of gold, I would have sold him." Abu Bakr turned back, his face radiating the quiet dignity of faith, and delivered a reply that would be immortalized. "By God, if you had refused to sell him for less than 100 ounces of gold, I would have paid it." He then took Bilal, tended to his wounds, and declared him a free man. The man whose body was crushed for the sake of God had been liberated by the grace of God. The words, "He is one," whispered under a rock in the burning desert, were about to become a voice that would echo from the highest point in the city. The voice from the heavens. Freedom was a strange and beautiful new reality. When the command came for the Muslims to migrate to the city of Yathrib, soon to be renamed Medina, Bilal was among them. In Medina, a new society was born, one built on the principles of brotherhood and equality. As the community settled, a question arose. How should they be called to prayer? After suggestions of horns and bells were set aside, a companion named Abdullah ibn Zayd had a divinely inspired dream in which he was taught the words of the call. He rushed to the Prophet, peace be upon him, who declared the dream to be true. Then came the moment that would forever define Bilal's legacy. The Prophet, peace be upon him, turned and gave a command that cemented the spirit of Islam in a single revolutionary act. He did not tell Abdullah ibn Zayd to make the call. He looked towards the former Abyssinian slave and said, as narrated in the collections of Sunan Abi Dawud, declaratively, "Go and teach the words to Bilal, for he has a more beautiful and far-reaching voice than you." It was a profound statement. The Prophet of God chose a black man, a former slave, to be the official voice of Islam, bestowing the highest honor on the man society had deemed the lowest. The voice that Umayyah had tried to silence with a rock was now to be raised from the highest point in the city. Bilal ascended to the roof of the mosque. He took a deep breath, and for the first time, the call to prayer rang out over Medina. His voice, rich, powerful, and full of emotion, soared through the air. When he declared God's greatness, it came from a place of absolute conviction, forged in the fires of Makkah. From that day forward, he was the official caller to prayer for the messenger of God. Years passed. On the historic day of the conquest of Makkah, after the idols in the Kaaba were destroyed, the time for prayer arrived. The Prophet, peace be upon him, turned to Bilal. "O Bilal," commanding he commanded, "climb upon the roof of the Kaaba and make the call to prayer." Bilal, the same man who was once tortured in the valleys below, now ascended to the roof of Arabia's most sacred shrine. He stood where the idols had once been, he looked down upon the city of his enslavement. And from that hallowed spot, his voice boomed across his former prison, proclaiming the oneness of God for all to hear. It was the ultimate victory. The symbol of oppression had become the symbol of liberation. The silence and the echo. For as long as the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, lived, the voice of Bilal was the sound of certainty. But when the Prophet passed away, the light seemed to go out of Bilal's life. The city of Medina was drowned in grief, but for Bilal, the pain was unbearable. Every corner of the city, every stone of the mosque, reminded him of the man he loved more than life itself. The call to prayer, once his greatest honor, now became his greatest source of pain. Each word was a memory. How could he say, "I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of God," when that messenger was no longer there to emerge from his chambers? His voice fell silent. Overcome with grief, he could no longer bring himself to call the prayer in Medina. He approached the Caliph, Abu Bakr, and asked for permission to leave. "If you freed me for yourself," he told his old friend, "then keep me here. But if you freed me for the sake of God, then let me go in the path of God." Abu Bakr, with a heavy heart, let him go. Bilal journeyed to Syria, where he lived a quiet life. His famous voice now reserved for his private remembrances. Solemnly, years later, during the caliphate of Umar ibn al-Khattab, the Muslim army conquered the holy city of Jerusalem. Umar traveled there to accept the keys to the city and was met by the companions who had settled in the region. They had one heartfelt request: longed to hear the voice of the Prophet's caller to prayer one more time. They pleaded with Bilal, but he respectfully refused. The memories were still too raw. Finally, the grandsons of the Prophet, peace be upon him, Hassan and Hussein, came and personally asked him. Seeing the face of his beloved master in their features, he could not refuse. He ascended the steps of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. As he began the call, a hush fell over the city. When his voice, now aged but still powerful, boomed, "God is the greatest! God is the greatest!" the hardened soldiers and old companions began to tremble. When he reached the line, "I bear witness that Muhammad is the messenger of God," he broke down, his voice choked with tears. The entire gathering, including the formidable Umar, began to weep uncontrollably. It was said that no one had ever seen a day of more weeping since the day the Prophet himself had passed away. It was his final public call, the echo of a lifetime of love and loyalty. And though his voice fell silent on earth, it was destined to echo in eternity. The Prophet, peace be upon him, once told him, "O Bilal, I heard the sound of your footsteps in front of me in paradise." Sahih al-Bukhari, 1149. The voiceless man, who spoke only 2 words under torture, had walked his way into heaven, leaving behind a legacy that proves forever that the truest power lies not in a man's voice, but in the unwavering faith that gives it strength.